Hello, wonderful patrons. I am Greta. Thank you so much for supporting what I do here, for supporting Ayurveda and Iyengar Yoga. And my goal is to provide you with inspiration and practical guidance in both Iyengar Yoga and Ayurveda. So that said, I thought that first it would be good to give you an introduction to Ayurveda. I know that many of you may have familiarity with Ayurveda. Also, I have a number of articles and blog posts out there, which I will share so that you can learn more about Ayurveda. But, since some of us like to learn more through audio and visual, a little introduction I thought would be a good place to start. So this is not, some huge in-depth history or a detailed summary of Ayurveda, but just a little practical information if you're wondering what the heck is she talking about? What is Ayurveda? So what is it? Ayurveda is the traditional medicine of India. It is thousands of years old. It is probably hard to tell exactly when Ayurveda started, but we do have texts that date back at least a couple thousand years where Ayurveda was codified. And it is a holistic system, and then it addresses the physical, the mental, the emotional, even the spiritual health of the individual. And it's also highly individualized. So Ayurveda is not one size fits all. And I'll get more into that in this introduction. And then also as we go along, and if you check out my articles and recipes, you'll see more how nuanced Ayurveda is. But anyway, now Ayurveda is often called a sister science of yoga. Now, some people say, oh, really, Ayurveda and yoga didn't become associated till later on. But I will say, as a practitioner of both, I do find that Ayurveda and yoga are amazingly complementary for one another. I do have a yoga teacher who says that if there's a lifestyle for yoga, it's Ayurveda. So certainly if you practice yoga, if you're a student of yoga, knowing something about Ayurveda, knowing how to care for yourself through Ayurveda is going to be an immense benefit to you in your yoga practice and just in life in general. Ayurveda is for almost anybody. Okay, so let's back up. Let's talk a bit about the basics here. So Ayurveda and yoga actually share the 5-element paradigm of physiology, and that is that all things in nature are made of the 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Okay. And those 5 elements, they are real. They exist in the natural world, as we all know. And also they are qualitative. They represent qualities within us, qualities within the food we eat, anything that we take in through the 5 senses, everything in the natural world is made up of some combination of these 5 elements. So we look at ourselves, our own body constitution, we look at the foods we take in, even the colors we're wearing, and we look at what are the qualities within that matter. Is it heavy? Is it light? Is it dense? Is it moist? Is it dry? Is it mobile? Is it stable? Okay. So let's talk a bit about these 5 elements. So earth it represents solidity and stability. And these are just some adjectives to describe the elements. It's not exhaustive. So earth represents solidity and stability. Water represents receptivity, flow. It relates to the emotions. Fire represents light, heat, transformation. Air deals with motion. And ether deals with empty space, possibility. Also, ether is the container for the other elements. Now, we could talk more about each of the 5 elements, but I think more relevant to our conversation here, let's talk about how those 5 elements to combine to then make the 3 doshas. So if you've come across Ayurveda a bit, you've probably heard of the 3 doshas, Vata, Pitta, Kapha, and it's like, okay, what's your type? So those 3 doshas, those 3, you could call them constitutional types, or they can be considered forces within us. The literal translation of dosha is more like to that which spoils, or it can be considered like a fault or to cause harm, because when the doshas become excessive, that's when we get into to health issues and imbalances. But anyway, we're all made of the elements. We're all made of the three doshas. It's not right or wrong. It just is. It's nature. So earth and water combine to make kapha dosha. Okay, what are the qualities of kapha dosha? Kapha dosha is heavy, it is dense, it is stable, moist. Okay, so if you think about earth and water, what are the qualities of earth and water? Those combine to, those qualities come together in that dosha known as kapha dosha. And again, these three doshas, you can kind of view them as like constitutional types or sort of forces within us. So each individual has some balance of the three doshas. So anyway, a person with a lot of kapha in their constitution, a very earthy and watery constitution, that groundedness, solidity, stability, it'll show up in different ways. So it may show up as a more like solid body type, a little bit of a larger build, or just kind of bigger boned, or more fleshy, or more larger muscles. People with more kapha dosha in their constitution, more earth and water, also will tend to have perhaps like thicker skin, more like they tend to have nice complexions, like moist, smooth skin, thick hair, really sturdy bones, teeth, nails. Also, there tends to be sort of a roundedness to their build and their features. And again, it's not to say it's like somebody with kapha is necessarily overweight or anything like that, but it's just that there's a little bit more of like a softness, a roundedness, a fullness to their build and to their features. And also the solidity, stability, it shows up in the way that they go about their work, their communications. People with a lot of kapha will tend to be more deliberate in their planning. They tend to like do well with routines and like routines. There's that steadiness. These people with a lot of kapha in their constitution also may tend to stay in one home or one job or one relationship for many, many decades. Whereas people with more of the vata and pitta, which I'll get to in a minute, more of the airy, fiery qualities, you might tend to see a little bit more change in their lives just because of their nature. So, kapha, some of the wonderful qualities about folks with a lot of kapha dosha are that steadiness, dependability, not easily flustered or stressed. They can be very nurturing, comforting. Having a good kapha friend when you're going through a rough time can be a wonderful comfort. That dependability, really thinking through each step. These are all wonderful qualities. And then on the other hand, when that kapha dosha becomes excessive, then you might see things like excess water retention, or kind of too much mucus, or like too much heaviness, too much stability. So it could be like a dense, sort of maybe like a lethargy, or a difficulty in motivating, or kind of a stuckness. So, all the doshas have their positive attributes, and then when those doshas become excessive, then things happen that aren't so desirable. And I'll talk more also in future videos and future articles then about what to do with each dosha when it starts to become out of balance. So what's it like when it's in balance, and then what happens when it starts to become excessive? All right, so then we have pitta dosha. So pitta dosha is made of fire and water. And with pitta, it's really big fire, a little bit of water just to kind of balance out the fire. So those with a lot of this fire element, this pitta dosha, that fieriness shows through in many ways. So there's a sharpness there, and that sharpness can show up in terms of like an angularity in the features. This tends to be like a more moderate or athletic sort of body type. More angular, kind of squarish features will tend to indicate some pitta dosha. And then also that sharpness can be like an acuity in observation, an ability to take in information and analyze it and synthesize it, and then give it back to people, like in the form of teaching. But when that fire runs too hot, then you might see or witness sharp tongue, hot temper, so too much heat, too much fire, and really anything that relates to excess heat, redness, that's going to tend to point to some kind of pitta imbalance. So if you're seeing redness, inflammation, burning, indigestion, hot tempered, overly judgy, critical, those are going to be pitta qualities. But let's not forget also that fire is digestion, it's luminosity, it's the ability to see. So being able to see and perceive and analyze and digest complex information and make a plan and move forward, having that fire to move forward, to be a leader, a teacher, these are all related to pitta dosha. All right, and then we have vata. So vata dosha is made of air and ether. And these vata types, with a lot of this air and ether element, you're going to see the qualities of lightness and mobility and subtlety really come through. So, if you have air and ether, there's no weight of earth or even water. There isn't the fire there. Although, again, we all have all three. It's not, nobody can be all one. But so there's this lightness, this mobility. So you'll see this in their build. People with a natural vata constitution are just going to be a little bit smaller boned, lighter framed. Again, the weight could fluctuate. It's not all about the weight, but it's just kind of about the overall structure and frame. You might also see like finer hair or kind of smaller features. And there's a little bit of a delicateness to vata types. They also tend to like to move a lot. They tend to move easily. They may have a hard time sitting still. They can be quite adaptable, and they can also be quite quick moving, fast learners. So these are all great, creative, bubbly, all those things. But when that air is too whirly swirly and there's not enough earth and kind of structure to ground it, then you're going to see issues such as like overly rapid thinking, which can lead to anxiety, worry. You might see insomnia. There's a dryness, lightness, dryness to vata dosha. So you might see things like dry skin or getting very dry on the inside, which can cause digestive issues like constipation or, even dry eyes, dry hair, a brittleness to the tissues. Things like underweight, emaciation, atrophy, that's excess vata dosha. And vata dosha, it also relates to change. Air is mobile. So when we have change in our life, that is an increase in vata dosha. So, you could be a kapha person or a pitta person, but you're going through lots of big changes. That's going to elevate that vata dosha. And so then still you want to likely do things to kind of keep that vata dosha in check. So bringing in stability and routine. And again, more and more on all of this. Ayurveda is vast, it is deep, it is profound, poetic, practical. But I did just want to give you sort of a quick snapshot overview of what am I talking about when we talk about Ayurveda and Vata Pitta Kapha. I will put up some resources to read as well, and I'll take some time to break down each of these doshas and what to do if you are predominant in each, or if you have an imbalance in each one. But also just good to remember again that we all are made of all three, Vata, Pitta, Kapha. We all have all five elements within us: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. And we all have our natural constitution, what we're born with, our prakriti. And then we have our current state, our vikriti, and that ebbs and flows and changes throughout our lives. So it's important, helpful to understand our natural constitution, but in many ways, even more important to understand what is happening with us in the moment. And so our time of life, our phase of life, what we're going through in life, the climate we live in, the seasons have a huge effect on the doshas. All of these things play a major role. But for starters, you can just kind of start to think to yourself and notice, what are your qualities, or what, maybe sometimes it's easier to look at somebody, look at your partner or a good friend or a family member, and just start to notice, what are, not to judge, but Are they quick moving or slow moving? If it's you, do you run warm or do you run cold? Um, do you tend to struggle with routine, or is routine very natural for you? And just kind of starting to notice those qualities within yourself can give you a hint as to then how to bring about more balance. All right. Thank you for tuning in, lovely patrons. So much more to come. And do stay tuned for more inspiration and practical guidance in Ayurveda and Iyengar Yoga. This is Greta here, signing off.